Today, we are jumping right into the very heart of the Psalms. We're going to explore 5 specific chapters that, honestly, feel like a roadmap for the human soul. We're going to journey through these really personal pleas, some huge global hopes, moments of profound darkness, and, finally, land on a prayer for wisdom. It's a real emotional roller coaster, and it's all right here.
Just think about that for a second. When you're on top of the world or at your absolute lowest point, how do you even find the words to express that? Well, the Psalms have been that source for thousands of years. They've given people a language to talk to God with raw, brutal honesty without holding anything back.
So here's the game plan. We're starting with a deeply personal prayer for help in Psalm 86. Then, we're going to zoom out to a vision of a global community in 87. From there, we plunge right into the darkness of pure lament in 88, wrestle with a divine promise in 89, and then finally, we land in a place of eternal perspective with Psalm 90. It's quite the trip, so let's get into it.
All right, first stop, Psalm 86. And right away, you can feel this isn't some big, polished choir anthem. No, this is an intensely personal, vulnerable cry for help. It's attributed to King David himself, and you can hear it. He's not putting on a brave face, he's just coming to God exactly as he is, in his moment of need.
And this right here, this is the foundation of his entire prayer. Notice what he's not saying. He isn't saying, help me because I deserve it, or help me because I'm so good. He's saying, help me because you are good. The whole appeal is built on God's character, his goodness, his readiness to forgive, his incredible mercy. That's a huge shift in perspective, away from our own merits and onto who God is.
And what's so cool here is watching how the prayer builds. It starts with this raw admission of need. I am poor and needy. Total humility. Then it moves to a plea not just for rescue, but for guidance. Then he pivots to just praising God's character, reminding himself who he's talking to. And it wraps up with this bold request for a tangible sign. For us, this is like a roadmap for prayer. Be honest about your need, ask for wisdom, remember who God is, and don't be afraid to ask for help you can see. It teaches us that being totally dependent on God is, in itself, a powerful form of worship.
Okay, get ready for a pretty dramatic shift. With Psalm 87, we are zooming way out from one person's private prayer to this breathtaking global vision of hope for the entire world, and it all centers on one place, Zion, the city of God. This idea right here is, for its time, absolutely radical. Zion, which is Jerusalem, is being presented as the spiritual birthplace for all people. The psalmist is painting this picture of a day when people from nations that were historic enemies of Israel, we're talking Egypt, which is called Rahab here, and Babylon, will be counted as if they were born right there as native citizens of God's city. So you see what's happening here? This is radical inclusivity. I mean, look at that list of nations. It's a global roster of former outsiders. The message is that your spiritual citizenship in God's kingdom has nothing to do with your ethnicity or your passport. Everyone finds their source of life, their springs, in God. It's such a powerful challenge to any kind of us versus them thinking, pointing to a unity that's based not on where we're from, but on whose we are.
All right, brace yourself, because the tone is about to do a complete nosedive. After the bright, shining hope of Psalm 87, we descend into Psalm 88. And this is widely considered to be the darkest, most bleak, most desolate psalm in the entire book. This is a raw cry from the abyss.
That is the final line of the psalm. Just let that sink in. It is absolutely haunting. See, most psalms of lament, even the really sad ones, they have a little turn at the end, a little glimmer of hope or a declaration of trust. Not Psalm 88. It starts in darkness and it ends in darkness. The very last word is darkness. It gives a voice to suffering that is raw, real, and just unresolved. This table kind of breaks down the anatomy of that despair. The writer feels completely abandoned, not just by his friends, but by God himself. So you have to ask, why is something this bleak in the Bible? Well, it's because it validates this incredibly painful human experience. It gives all of us permission to be brutally honest with God when all we feel is darkness. It tells us that faith isn't about pretending everything's okay. It's about crying out from wherever we really are, even if that place is the pit of despair. Okay, moving on from the intense personal despair of Psalm 88, Psalm 89 unfolds like this powerful drama, almost like a play in 2 acts. It starts with this soaring celebration of God's unbreakable promise to King David, but then it just collides head-on with a painful, devastating reality that seems to contradict everything about that promise.
And here's Act 1. This is the bedrock of the whole first half of the psalm, the Davidic covenant. The psalmist is passionately recounting God's own sworn oath, this eternal, unbreakable promise that a descendant of David would always be on the throne. This isn't just a wish, it's framed as a divine guarantee.
And then, bam, Act 2 crashes in. You can feel the crisis. Historically, this psalm was probably written during a national catastrophe, maybe the Babylonian exile, when the whole kingdom was shattered. So the psalmist is holding God's promise in one hand and this devastating reality in the other, and he's basically screaming, "What happened?" This is a masterclass in how to wrestle with your faith when life seems to break God's promises. It teaches us to bring our confusion, even our anger, straight to God, trusting that His covenant is strong enough to handle our questions.
So for our final stop, we're pulling the camera way, way back to a place of profound reflection with Psalm 90. This one is attributed to Moses, and it lifts our eyes from the immediate crisis to an eternal perspective. It gives us this powerful contrast between the infinite, timeless nature of God and the fragile, fleeting nature of our human lives.
The psalm kicks off by establishing this immense, almost mind-bending reality. Before there were mountains, before the world even existed, God simply is, from everlasting to everlasting. This isn't just a philosophical idea, it's the anchor for everything else the psalmist is about to say.
And then you get this. The contrast just could not be more stark. We go from everlasting to everlasting, all the way down to 70 years. 80 if you're lucky. And the psalmist is honest. It says, this short life is often filled with labor and sorrow. And then it's over in a flash. But this isn't meant to be depressing, it's meant to be clarifying.
Because here it is. This is the central plea, the whole point of the psalm. Realizing that our life is short isn't supposed to make us despair, it's supposed to make us wise. The prayer is essentially, God, since my time is so limited, teach me to make every single day count. Teach me to live with purpose. It's the ultimate call to stop confusing what feels urgent with what's actually important.
So there you have it, the whole arc of the journey. We went from a personal cry for help to a global hope for everyone, down into the pit of despair, through a genuine crisis of faith, and finally landed in a place of profound wisdom. Together, these 5 psalms map out the honest, messy, and beautiful landscape of a life lived before God.
And that leads us to one final thought, straight from the end of Psalm 90. It says, our lives pass by like a tale that is told, and then it asks God to establish the work of our hands. So as we think about our own brief story, the question it leaves us with is this: what is the meaningful work of our lives that we hope and that we ask God to make last?